Okay, so the big kind of piece for me is we were just talking. I started playing uh, in 2009 was my first real time doing Eve. I technically got it in 2008. Uh, I realized later that I had it, didn't really get into it, stopped playing it almost immediately. But a year later, I came back to it, and I've been playing effectively continuously ever since. You know, take a weekend off or something like that. Go on vacation, doing those kind of things for a week or two. But I've never really stopped playing it for then. Since that point, so almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years this fall for me. I started out as a high sec guy, doing mission running, mining, the normal high sec things. At that point in time, I had a player corporation that I was in. Um, that our idea was very much like what KFU does now. We wanted to be a training corporation, a training group. At the time, Citadels didn't exist, so you had to do everything out of pauses to try and do it, and it was a lot more difficult to run a training uh, corp. It was just the mechanics were not so easy. KFU is a lot. Like we dreamed of something like what KFU is today, but we had that idea, over 10 years ago. It just didn't work for us. We couldn't get that to work. Uh, I've lived in high sec space, as I mentioned at the beginning. I've lived in wormhole space, but I spent the bulk of my time in nullsec. Um, my first nullsec alliance doesn't exist anymore. It was a group called Strange Brew. We lived in that time in the region of Oasa, in the north or northeast part of the map, however you so define that. Most of the nullsec groups do it just based on the Dotland map. If you look at the Dotland universe map, that's how we do north, south, east, and west, is from those maps. And we lived in Oasa at the time. That alliance doesn't exist anymore. Its space was overrun by PL, and we had to move. We ended up joining, we compressed our alliance into a corporation, and that corporation then joined Razor, who was living literally one region over. They were right next door to us. Uh, Lasted for a little while. Then, honestly, there was some drama in the corp. One of the directors decided that she didn't like what was going on. She more or less staged a coup. Razor's leadership at the time backed the coup leader, and basically the entire corp just disintegrated. So that alliance no longer exists. That corp doesn't exist either. Not really. Again, it was called Strange Brew. At that point, I started looking around myself to see, where I should go. Strange Brew, the alliance was loosely affiliated with what was then at the time called Deco, that became the CFC, but it was still called Deco at that time. We were kind of allied to them, kind of light blues, not really friends, not really enemies, but during a war we would fight on each other's same side. I started looking around trying to find a group to go to. I ended up in an alliance called Fail Ascension. They don't exist anymore, but that's who I joined at that point in time. Was with them for a little while. I was in a corporation of Aussies, uh, which was really difficult because I was the only American in the entire corporation. So I would get up and they were all going to bed. They would get home from work and I was going to bed. So I was basically in a corp by myself effectively for about a year or so. That corp actually joined TNT during that time. That line still exists. It's part of the Imperium today, but again, it was called Deco back then and the CFC. So Fatal Ascension doesn't exist, but TNT does. And it is run by Wibla, and it was at the time as well. He's been head of TNT for over a decade. I was with TNT for a while. I had some real life stuff kind of happen and really just kind of screwed things up for me. So I moved back to HiSec, took a uh, break from nullsec things I was still on. I was actually running Sisters of Eve missions. This was when things like the Astero and the Stratios were first introduced to the game. So I was uh, mission running for them so I could get the loyalty points to get the prints for those hulls at the time. And just looking around, I think I did that for a couple of months while I was deciding what I wanted to do. Having been in the CFC, I wanted to come back to it. And I started looking at, okay, what corporations were around. The original corporation that I was in uh, just didn't exist like that way. That's the Aussie corporation I mentioned earlier. They just weren't really active. They were kind of around. The problem is that they were still heavily Australian uh, member base, so I would still be the only American in the corporation. And having done that once, it's kind of dull. So I looked at it and said, I'm not super interested in this. I was looking around in corporations that were in Goonswarm itself. And this is when I joined Goonswarm, the Alliance. I joined a corporation called Wildly Inappropriate, DOT. They actually did have a DOT at the time. We call it WeDotting now, which is when your alliance compresses into a single corporation. That comes from the Wildly Inappropriate Alliance that compressed down into the Wildly Inappropriate Corporation. So I joined that corporation. At that time, to join WeDot, you needed to have either a carrier or a dreadnought. Faxes didn't exist then. There were carriers and dreadnoughts were the only capital combat ships at that point in time. I had either one or both. I think I had both at the time. So that was pretty much your entrance requirements. You had to have capital to do it, and I did. So I joined them. I was with them for years until the corporation just became inactive. I was made the SRP guy, so I handled all the SRP for the corporation, not for the alliance, but just for Wildly Inappropriate itself. And went through, did that, was involved in the Imperium's version of the training program. We called it Little Bees. At that time, it is now called University, but it's called Little Bees at this point. This was about 2016, 2017, um, maybe in 2015. We were still living in DEC at the time and started running classes, doing things on D scans, how to make saves, uh, did classes on combat probing using actual core probe launchers and expanded probe launchers, and what's the difference and how do you scan things down. So those are the first two classes that I ever did. I eventually became chair of classes for University. I was running all the classes. At that time, we had about 10 classes. I wrote almost all of them. There was one class that was a mining class written by another one of our instructors who worked for me in the University group. I eventually had to step down from that. I was given a promotion to director, to joining the directorate of Goon Swarm. So, where I created a new group which we call procurement. This was right at the beginning of what we call Vietnam. A lot of people call it World War B. Some people call it World War B2. There's a whole bunch of those, but it was the summer of 2020 that this happened. Those of you who know the history, this is the Imperium was successful in our defense of Delve. We won that war. Um, we reconquered all of our space. We had lost over 90% of it. The entire Imperium was reduced down to one constellation surrounding 1DQ. That invasion was primarily led by Test, but it also included, which was a part of Legacy. They were the founding members of Legacy with that, the Legacy Coalition. It also included FRT, included Horde, Brave, a whole bunch of people were involved in that. It was something like 100 alliances in that coalition in the end. We did end up winning, and just going through, I was head of procurement, going through everything, just doing all that kind of stuff. Procurement is a group that's within the Imperium is a very secretive production group. It's full of a whole bunch of industry nerds, and that's their primary purpose is they do special projects. About 2 years after that, um, I was sitting and the Matani retired as being director or head of Um, Goonswarm and Asher took over, Asher Elias, who is the current head of Goonswarm. When I got through everything, I was talking with Asher, and he named me as chief of staff about a year ago. And that's the role that I play in Goonswarm today. So I am Goonswarm's chief of staff. Um, that's kind of a brief history for myself. Uh, I think it's a lot more fun to do these as Q&As, as talking about different events. Uh, I've been involved in most of the block wars the last 10 years, so if there's something you guys are interested in hearing about, I can tell you stories about that. So I've got, as I mentioned, I've got my KFU alt online. I've got the Corp chat open, and then I'm looking right now in the general chat here on Discord. So if you guys have a question about a mechanic or the history of something or a story you all would like to hear, that's usually how I do these because I think it's more fun to tell you all about the history that I've seen rather than just, reading a boilerplate thing. So I did that at the beginning just for my own history, but I'm happy to expand on any of those things if you guys have something you'd like to hear about.
So how many ships do you lose on average per month?
Jesse, I hate you so much right now. I I have a reputation which is completely unjustified from a guy named Elvalar because I misplaced one Blops in the SMA of like a carrier or a dreadnought. I think it was a dreadnought, um, years and years ago. And Elvalar has perpetuated this myth to all of Karma Fleet, that I misplace and lose things constantly. This is all his fault, and it was one Blops um, years ago. Um, so I'll tell you all the story with this. I was talking with Elvalar one day, and I was trying to find a redeemer. It was a redeemer. Couldn't find the damn thing anywhere. I'm just like, I know I've got it. I've used it. I had it fitted up. Where the hell is this thing? At the time, in-game search functions would not look into SMAs of caps. So if you searched Redeemer and it was in a ship hangar somewhere, it would pop up. But if it was in the SMA of a cap, it would not. And so I couldn't find it anywhere. I was like, okay, what the hell happened to it? Did I sell this damn thing? Did I trade it to one of my alts and don't even realize it? So I just bought a new one. I was like, screw it. I need one in 1DQ. Uh, they're not that expensive. I'll just buy a new one. I wasn't using JEV Asset at the time. I do now, but I wasn't then. Alvalar mentioned it to me. So I downloaded it, and JEV would look into the SMA of caps. But like I said, the in-game search would not at the time. So when I found it, I went jokingly into Elvalar and I was like, "Oh, found it. It was in the SMA of a cap," and uh, that's how that worked. And at the time, Goonswarm was deployed to ROIR, which most of which is called Roar. So we were in Roar, and that's where that Redeemer was in a cap in Roar. And so that was over 5 years ago, and he has perpetuated that myth so much so that it's become a meme within not only Karma Fleet but most of GSF now. Is that Ranger loses and misplaces ships all the time, and it was one Redeemer.
Plus some freighters.
I've never misplaced a freighter.
And wasn't it Ravens too?
Nope, never done that either. The Ravens is a good story though. This was the height of the invasion. This was the NPC Keepstar timers. There was 5 of these timers, right? The Imperium destroyed 4 of them. The 5th one did become online, but one of those used Ravens. And I was not involved with this process. I actually missed the first few months of the war. A lot of people in GSF know this, but I was taken down with a really bad infection. It wasn't COVID, but this was the height of COVID. And I was in the ICU and in the hospital for 79 days. And so I missed everything. I basically came home from the hospital. I went in the first week of September, and I came home the very end of November, is right around Thanksgiving. I was so weak I couldn't really do anything. So the first time I got to actually sit down at my desktop was the second battle of M2. Um, and I could only do it for about an hour or two at a time before I ended up in just tremendous pain. So I was doing fighter bomber SRP for our guys from the Battle of M2. But the Ravens you were talking about, that was actually Rat Knight's big thing. Uh, and to this day, within the procurement group and most of the higher levels of GSF, uh, when you want to give somebody an impossible task, you just ask them for Ravens. And it's a meme from the Keep Star timers in 2020. And the meme part of it is Asher came to Rat Knight and said, "Hey, I need 2,000 Ravens." And he gave him like 2 days to do it. To Rat Knight's
Wait,
credit,
what?
he pulled it off.
That sounds like a whole lot of material to build in 2 days.
It is. Now, at the time, they did not use the components that are in battleships today. It was just straight minerals. So it's a lot of stuff, but it's not as bad as it is today. They didn't use any like the core temperature regulators and the life support things.
So
Those modules didn't
manufacturing
exist.
used to be simpler?
It did for battleship hulls, yes.
Okay.
It
I
was literally straight minerals, man. You would put in the blueprint and it was, it's a fuckload of trit. Don't get me wrong. Just, oh my God, amounts of trit. But there was no component with it. The components came in um, about 3 or 4 months after this event that we're talking about. That was early 2021.
hmm.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It is a lot of crap. It's like he's saying, it's mechanics changed since the start of the war to the end of what we call Vietnam. That's when all those changes came into effect.
Yeah, it was a huge amount of stuff. Like I said, don't get me wrong. It was just a crap load of minerals, but the building of them is actually pretty easy. Um, and to this day, if you talk to Rat Knight about it, it wasn't building the hulls. It was actually getting all the launchers for them. Uh, we ended up with T1 and meta launchers and T2 launchers, and he and one of our other directors were flying around to every like podunk station in high sec trying to gather enough launchers to fit 2,000 of these hulls, and they did. They managed to pull it off.
That's awesome.
And like I said, I set up procurement. I did the original organization of it, but all of this I was actually uh, in the hospital. I was in the ICU for 30 days. I had complete respiratory failure. I actually died when I was in the ICU. Um, Fortunately, I was in a level 1 trauma center's ICU, so they brought me back pretty quickly. I actually saw the white light, the whole 9 yards. So that's, if you ever hear somebody talk about that's true. I saw it myself. But all of this stuff, that story I just told you guys, that happened while I was in the hospital. So I'm hearing about it, second, third hand, reading the transcripts of our comm channels and things like that. So I wasn't actually involved in that one. One of the other ones was destroyed by using basically suicide dreadnoughts. They warped like 3, 4, 5 dreadnoughts at a time onto this Keep Star. Uh, and then when a couple of them were killed, like 5 more would warp in. Um, and I'm not the other two. I don't know how they were killed. One of them was Ravens. One of them was Dreads. I don't know about the other two. And then the fifth one was online. Can't remember what system that Keepstar was in. We eventually killed it, but there was the fifth one that was successfully online. Uh, Biomiller? I butchered your name, dude. I'm sorry. Um, if you're talking about the war that I was just describing, right? We call it Vietnam. Uh, it ended because the uh, coalition that was attacking us, they had too much internal strife. Um, they didn't really like each other. They just kind of hated us more than they disliked each other. And eventually that strife got to be too much and their cohesion just shattered after a little while. Um,
So less of a complete morale collapse and more of a coalition collapse in that instance.
yeah, I mean, morale is a critical thing. Eve Wars and Nullsec are fought over territory. That's true. Absolutely, that is true. But it's effectively impossible to kill an alliance in Eve if the members are willing to log in and fight. You just retreat to Lowsec. Um, we did that during what we call the Casino War, when Citadels were first being introduced. We lost our home in Declan. We pulled back into the Tartokan area, and we stayed there for a little while. So killing an alliance is effectively impossible unless you can break the morale of the personnel, right? So if the people stop logging in, then you don't have a corporation or an alliance. And in this case, it was a little bit of both. People were getting tired of the war. It was not being run in a really good way. I will admit I have bias to it, right? Because right, my side won. If you talk to the people on the other side, you get a different version. Uh, but effectively, from our side, Villy, who was head of test at the time and was running everything, did a terrible job with that. And it just became to where the people wouldn't log in for him, wouldn't go on the fleets, and wouldn't really do anything. Uh, our morale suffered as well, right? You don't lose 90 plus percent of your space. We had 4 regions down to 7 systems. So we controlled 4 entire regions. We had Quarius, period basis, Delve, and Fountain, all 4 of those regions, down to 7 systems, right? That's a morale hit. But the invaders were never able to crack the 1DQ constellation that we had retreated to. And so after
So you guys
slamming,
basically pulled 4 regions worth of assets into what, 7 systems?
so I mean, sort of, we pulled people into that. You can't evacuate 4 regions worth of assets in an invasion like that. It doesn't work. Huge amounts of stuff got sent to asset safety. When we ended up winning the war and reconquered our space, uh, we did so many move ops out of Ermelin, which is the main one that Delve went to, was to Ermelin. We did an ungodly number of move ops of, hey guys, we're gonna put Titans up here. We're gonna have freighters. Go get your shit. Let's bring it back home. Um, I know everybody was doing that, so we primarily did it to Ermelin. I can't remember the other 2 stations. I forget the one from Fountain. I know that Init, who was and still today lives in Fountain, they did a whole bunch of move ops for their stuff as well. So people, yes. 4 regions worth of assets, no, it's not possible. We evacuated a lot of stuff, but a lot more of it was blown up. Right, you can't evacuate those citadels. That's just not a thing. What we did is we made the enemy fight us on every citadel. Every timer, there would be gunners in them shooting at them. And what we did is we found through leaks who was running out of money, who was having trouble with it, and we would shoot them first. Uh, I'll tell you right now, I was gunning some structures with Wibla, actually the head of TNT. He and I were in a system. He and I were each gunning one structure, and they had an entire legacy fleet there, and they also had a pandemic horde fleet there. And we knew who was running low on money. Their SRP bills was getting too high because we had spies. This is something you get used to in nullsec. Everybody has spies in everybody's group. And so Wibble and I were talking to each other, and we primaried the people who were running out of money, and we were just blowing fighter bombers out of space in job lots. And it got so expensive to them that Pandemic Horde had to bring a sub-cap fleet in to reinforce all the structures because we were killing their fighter bombers so fast.
You did a Cold War effort on them.
We did. We bankrupted them. Yeah. Well, we bankrupted one alliance for sure, and we know that because we have spy intel that says that.
Which alliance was bankrupted? Because alliances make a lot of money, and it would surprise me if that would have run it out.
It was Brave newbies. So it wasn't that. It wasn't one instance where we were blowing up fighter bombers. But when you do that constantly over 6 months, that is a toll, right? And the other piece to it is we had other groups that were in their space attacking their ratters and their miners. So we were costing them money on the war front, and then we were costing them the ability to make money at home. Um, and there's only so long coffers can withstand that before if you start downgrading fleets. And it's like, oh, you can't afford to bring, I'm going to go to a ridiculous extent. You can't afford to bring a fleet of paladins anymore. You got to downgrade into drakes. Obviously, that's an exaggeration. That didn't actually happen, but it's that kind of thing. Mina, yeah, a 10-year break. In my mind, you were playing an entirely new game because mechanics have changed. When you left, faxes weren't a thing. Uh, you could still do drone bunnies of the old school with it. You know, to me, you have an entirely new game. Sorry, I'm just reading all of your things. So I'm looking at this here. Yeah, so when you left, let's see, 10 years ago, the CFC should have been founded at that point. The CFC was founded at the beginning of what we call the IT war. IT was an alliance that lived at that time in Fountain. They were a descendant of Bob. There is a long history of animosity and hatred between Goonswarm
Bob?
and Bob.
What's Bob?
Stands for Band of Brothers. It was an
Okay.
alliance at that point in time. We hate them. They hate us. They don't exist anymore, sort of. The alliance doesn't exist as a hostile foe anymore, but its people are still around. You find them in the ranks of PL, so Pandemic Legion, Pandemic Horde, and NC Dot, Northern Coalition Dot. Those three still contain those people.
So a predecessor organization which still has grudge people in other groups then.
Yeah, absolutely. And we still have grudges against them, right? Goonswarm has a long history with him. That history goes back almost 20 years now. This is from the Great War in 2006, 2007, that kind of an era.
Sheesh.
And like I said, we hate them, they hate us. And it sparks most of the nullsec wars. You know, you would think that they're always fought over territory. That's not the case. Some of them are, sure. That's absolutely a thing. Fighting
But
over moons.
war in real life, and it isn't often fought over territory or economic statuses. That's often just used as a justification when the typical source is, I hate this person, I want to stab this person.
And you see a lot of the um, real life echoing in Eve or vice versa. The
Yeah.
skills that I've picked up in my real life, I use in Eve. And the skills I've picked up helping to manage people in Eve, like I said, I'm chief of staff now. I brought into my real life world. There's an amazing overlap with them. The economics is excellent when you look at, okay, how do markets react to something? For those of you who were around and remember the learning skills, when those skills were removed, and for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, that's great because they were stupid. Here's what they were. It was
I
5
remember.
skills. Yeah, let's say for those of you who've been around over 10 years, you remember the learning skills. It was 5 skills that trained charisma and willpower and intelligence, right? The 5 attributes for skill training. And all of these skills, the only thing they did was to make you train other skills faster. These were rank 1 skills. But what you did is new people who joined Eve, like your first corporation would be like, have you trained the learning skills yet? No. All right, put all 5 of these into your brain that you're going to train these things, and we'll see you in a month. And the thing to remember is that the skill queue today allows you to queue up 150 skills. It didn't back then. You could queue up as many as you wanted so long as the last skill started in less than 24 hours. So you had a 24-hour window that you could go longer, right? You could train a 30-day skill or a 10-day skill, but it had to start within 24 hours. And that's why the skill queue worked at that time. So you would get a program like EveMon, which I still use today. A lot of people do. It's a great little program if you've never seen it
Yeah, it
for,
still works. I use it.
yeah, for skill training. And it pops up this brilliant red notification that says, "Hey fool, your skill's going to run out in less than 24 hours." That comes from that point is because you had to reset them on 24-hour timers. So we would do it on like patch day. Patch days were always Tuesday, and you would put in like Battleship 5 or some ridiculous skill because CCP had a reputation for breaking Eve on patch day. And again, like I said, it was always Tuesday. It would never work on Tuesday. Like the servers would not be functional. So like you would go in Tuesday morning and nobody even tried to play Eve because they'd be like, "Yep, Eve's broken." And so you'd wait until Wednesday. So you'd always put this long skill in there. Yeah, I mean, so I'm just reading your stuff. Yeah, so 10 years ago, we were still living in deck. We lost deck about 3 or so years after that. I'm trying to remember when the Casino War was, but I think it was 2016, 2017, something like that. Um, the Imperium was founded about that point in time. Yeah, it's what we call the Cultural Revolution to get rid of the CFC name and to become the Imperium.
Oh, that's very internet for a name.
Yeah, so the CFC stands for the it stands for the Clusterfuck Coalition. That's where that name comes from.
Oh, that explains why you guys needed that then.
Yeah, it came from that point in time. Again, 10 or so years ago was pretty common, but yeah, that's what that stands for. So do we have to fight to regain Delve, or they all just leave? It's a little bit of both. The vast majority of the combat power did leave, but not all of it. So we did have to fight to retake Delve, but it wasn't. It was more like a mopping up operation, right? It was, basically we'd go into a system, we'd ref every structure that there was, move to the next system, ref all of those structures, move to the next one, right? And we would write down, of course, all of these timers.
Less grinding assault, more
It's
complete
horribly
route.
dull. Yeah, it's really fucking dull. Um, you would just sit and just shoot structures for hours on end, and then you'd get bored after like 5 or 6 hours of it, and the next group of people would take it over. Um, so it is a little bit both. And is another war likely? Yeah, the blocks get together about every 5 years and decide they're going to have a big throwdown. So there will always be another
What
war like that.
happens in between? Because what happens in between big wars beyond everyone tries to refill their coffers?
That's the
Or
main thing. Yeah, there are proxy wars that occur. The
so closer to 15th to early 18th century of forever war with occasional big flare-ups.
Sure, you put it that way. Yeah, I mean it's one of those
Okay.
things of when you look at the history of them. Uh, the war that was concluded just about 6 months ago, where um, FRT, right, we call them frat, but fraternity is their formal name, was moving into the north area there where Brave was living at that point in time. You can make a pretty good case that was a proxy war. Like GSF and the Imperium were there to help Brave, And Horde and Legacy and everybody else was there to help FRT, but we weren't invading each other's core regions. We were not attacking each other's infrastructure. We were having a little throwdown in somebody else's space. Um, so to me, I consider that
So
to
you
be a proxy
basically
war.
just lit someone else's lawn on fire instead of losing your own.
Yeah, I mean there is that. We didn't so FRT invaded them because I wanted renter space. We were there to defend, but yeah, yeah. It was not our space. We were just there defending it. So is another war coming? Yes, absolutely. They always are. We assume, let me rephrase that. I can't promise that, but we assume based on history that there will be another one within a couple of years. And so we tell all of our people, get minerals, get ship hulls, get modules, get stuff, that you can have prepared to it, because we assume there's going to be another block level war.
What's the most valuable item? Like just by single like what's the most valuable thing that is often the bottleneck
So to be honest, there's no way to answer that because
during wartime?
yeah, it depends on like what you're looking at. The true honest answer to that, and it's kind of a cop out, but it's true, is morale. Is your own people's morale that we talked about earlier. Because you can have all the money in the world, you can have all the ships in the world, but if your people don't log in, that doesn't matter. You're gonna lose. Um, if you're looking for an actual specific item, that is much more difficult to pin down because it changes over time, right? It's okay. This is the hull type that's favored, right? Hacks were big. Heavy assault cruisers were big during what we call Vietnam. Uh, we got prices on those because we started to mass produce things like Cerberus hulls. We got those prices down very low because we were producing hundreds of them a day and just throwing them at the enemy. So, economies of scale kind of a thing. Um, and so it's really, really difficult to pick a single item like that. Uh, because if something gets too expensive, you just change it to something else. So, if this T2 item you can't really get, okay, you look for a T1 version or meta versions of it. This T2 hull, is there a faction hull that you can get better? Can you just use the T1 hulls with it? So, like a single item, yeah, that's really hard to say. Um, but morale is critical. You will absolutely lose a war if your people will not log in to shoot the enemy.
Has that ever happened to Imperium goons, whatever the proper term is?
So my argument to that is no, it never has, because we are still around and we have not lost a war like that. Um, you could maybe make a case for it when we got evicted out of deck, at the beginning of, again, what we call the Casino War. But our morale never broke. We just lost all of our space. And what leadership had to do, now I was not in the leadership cadre at the time. I was just a instructor, again, in our version of the training groups there called Little Bees. But it's just keeping everybody entertained, keeping everybody logging in, going, okay, what are we going to do today? Let's go camp a gate. Let's go run some missions over here. Uh, let's go, run through our old space and see if we can poke somebody. It's keeping up that morale, keeping your guys engaged, keeping everybody having fun. That's what you have to do.
How would you classify the investment of Little Bees, which became University, with the training and the free handouts to everybody?
That's an interesting one. When I first started it, that was not the case. It was Little Bees and University was a one-on-one mentoring, peer mentoring kind of a thing with an occasional class. That's how it originally started. It became more of a classes thing, like what KFU does and what University does quite extensively today. Um, the free handouts is a result of us wanting to be able to get new players involved in fights who don't have the skills to fly a carrier, who don't have the skills for T2 guns on a battleship, who don't have that, and yet could be really valuable. So, E-War
As a meat
things.
shield, then.
No, they're not meat shields. They're given things like E-War hulls, so target dampeners, weapons disruptors, target painters, those kind of things that really make a difference to the engagement. Now, is that to say we don't use like meat shields? No, we do. There are fleets that are designed to be close range, and if you don't kill us, we are so close to you that this is going to end poorly for you. They're short range slugging hulls. Think like a Brutix. You're going to be right on top of somebody with blasters. They have to take care of you, because if they don't, you're at point blank range and you're just going to F up their fleet. Well, if that's the way you're configuring that hull, then you put the heaviest tank on that hull that you can, so that they have to divert all that firepower to those ships. That's what we mean when we say something's like a meat shield. We don't usually use that term because it's a negative connotation. We refer to it as the noble sacrifice, right? It's the fleet that's there to hold the enemy in place. Because we expect them to draw that fire. We heavily tank them specifically to do that, so that other fleets have free range, right? You put scrams on them. If you are in, with 200 Brutix, hulls, and each one of them has a scram on you, your fleet's not going anywhere. MJDs turn off, and so do micro jump drives. So you can't use micro warp drives, can't use micro jump drives with a scram on you. That fleet's not going anywhere. And so you have to knock all of those guys out first. And then maybe your long range guys are sniping them, or they're hitting a citadel that you're targeting. They're doing something else. And the other thing that you'd use is a whole bunch of E-War hulls. So if you're going up against a sniping configuration, you put like 100 sensor dampener hulls out there, and now they can't lock over 50 kilometers. And what are they going to do to you, right? It's makes locking those, and most of those hulls, by the way, are frigates. So like a battleship lock time against a frigate with a couple of sensor damps on it is unbelievable. It can be over a minute to lock that hull, and battleship weapons won't track frigates. So then they have to bring their own support fleet in to kill your support fleet. Uh, and that's the chess game that our FCs have to fight against their FCs. It's what's the range that you're going to use your weapons? How are you positioned in space? Where are you? Where are they? All those kind of pieces.
Nice.
The hardest thing is when you have to look at it and go, okay, guys, we call it the blue balls, right? You look at it and you go, all right, guys, they've got too much. We cannot engage them. We're just going to stand down. And that's a really hard thing to do. Like I said, morale is critical to this. And if you hype up your guys, like, hey, we're going to go and punch these some bitches in the face, and you go, yeah, we're not going to do that today. You can only do that so many times before your own people start telling you to fuck off, and they won't come on your fleets. You have to be honest with your people about what you can do. And Asher, right, our leader right now, is big on telling the guys the truth. He's like, okay, we wanted to do this. We can't. They're going to just annihilate all of our fleets. He's not a big one on wasting people's time and spending resources for nothing. If we're trying to knock something out, we care about the objective. So if our objective is to destroy this target, kill boards don't matter to us. Honestly, we don't give a shit about kill boards at all. Some groups do. Some groups really care about it. We don't. We care about doing the objective with it. Does that mean we don't ping out battle reports? We do. We do it constantly. After every engagement, we're like, hey, check this out. So we do that.
So,
But somebody who's like,
more
oh, well, my kill board's red, we're going to be like, yeah, we don't give a shit.
so less individual glory hounding then.
Yeah, we don't really care. I mean, like if you do something especially cool, you may get in a ping and say, hey, this person went and tackled, the enemy FC, uh, and, his entire fleet was annihilated because of that. You may get an attaboy to it. But if somebody comes to the directorate and says, my kill board's red, I feel bad, we tell them to shut up because we don't care. We're trying to win an objective. Your kill board is irrelevant to us. I don't even know what my kill board looks like, to be honest. I haven't looked at it in years because we truly don't care at all. We have SRP programs like, oh, your hull got blown up. All right, here's usually not a new hull. It's usually just ISK. Get a new one. Get back in the fight. Having said that, most of the nullsec alliances have SRP programs. I'm not aware of one that doesn't, but that doesn't mean you guys couldn't find one that doesn't. All the major ones do. I personally think they're a little less efficient than ours. Our team is run by a crazy group of people who are just madmen for doing SRP, but every nullsec alliance that I know of has got an SRP program.
So how independent are nullsec alliances from the big ones, especially from everyone else in terms of material and such?
So there is no independence from everything. CCP has made sure of that. You have to import something from somewhere. It didn't used to be that way. Years ago, you really could have more or less complete independence, but that is not a thing anymore. CCP has made sure that you, like, for uh, carriers or dreadnoughts and faxes and supers and titans for the capital ships, you need stuff from materials that you can only get in wormhole space, in low sec, in high sec, and in null sec. You have to have all of those together to build these hulls now. So the idea of an independent group is not a thing. What people do is they all bring in stuff from JITA or Amar. JITA is the primary trade hub that is used to build these things. Because you simply cannot get it all in your own space. That's just not a thing anymore. And the problem is that a lot of groups, you sit down and you go, oh, well, we're just going to make a low sec, group, and it's going to go over here and do this. Uh, low sec is scary space. There are several groups in low sec that the null blocks do not fuck with because they will just ruin your day.
I've died several times crossing low sec. So how are they? Is there a reason, like environmental pressures or something, why they're scary?
So low sec, you can't use warp disruptor bubbles. So an interdictor or a heavy interdictor, we call them Hicks and Dicks usually, or dictors. You can't use those bubbles in low sec, which means their pilots very rarely get potted. So they run around with high grade implants on pretty blingy ships. So they're difficult to tangle with. You generally end up losing more than it's worth to engage them at scale. Like on an individual battle, yeah, you may win a single engagement, but
So
it's hard.
it's more of um in-game skills and equipment as opposed to actual player skill that affects them being
Well, one of the
difficult.
other things that comes into play is with a lot of nullsec being the way it is right now, a lot of the really good people are going to lowsec because they're capitals and not get yelled at. So
That
it's
and it's
null.
a different environment, like Ranger said about the bubbles. It's just a different environment. They live in that every day. If a nullsec group comes and dips their toes in nullsec, one, your pilots, they expect the bubbles, so they won't wear their blingy pods for fear of loss, where the enemy will.
And the idea of capitals, yeah, using caps in low sec is safer than using them in null sec because of these lacks of bubbles. A single interdictor bubble can trap an entire capital fleet, um, because caps align really slowly. So if they're aligning towards something and you pop an interdictor bubble in line with them, they either have to wait for that bubble to go down, which takes a couple of minutes, and then you just fire another one, or they have to try and change their alignment, right? Hope they can go through it, and all those kind of things. Um, so caps are a lot safer to use in low sec because you have to use scrams and disruptors to hold them in place, rather than just firing a bubble in a fleet and you trap 100 of them. You'd have to get 100 people to get scrams or disruptors onto a cap, and that's hard to do. Not to mention supers and titans, which require more than one scram to hold them in place. But a single bubble will hold a titan in place. Whether it's a Hictor or a Dictor bubble, it doesn't matter. Mobile warp disruptors also don't work in low sec. Those are real common in null sec also. Usually for static defenses around gates and things like that. And those mechanics just don't work. The other one that doesn't work in low sec is bombs, like a stealth bomber, the bomb launcher. You can't use those in low sec. You use the torpedoes, but not the bombs. Yeah, so it's a lot of different factors. Most of the null sec groups do a little bit of stuff in low sec, but there's not a huge presence. Like they may mine some moons or something like that, or do mission running or get burners or something like that, but they're not really living in low sec. It's generally not worth the effort. Mina, I see you type, and I have a feeling that's going to be a big question here. Oh, that's not too bad. Really? No, that's weird. Because they lowered the requirements to fly caps. That's super interesting. I find that very odd. Because it used to be you had to have Battleship 5 to even train capitals. You don't anymore. Huh. Fighters. Interesting. I don't know what that could be. Do you need fighters 4 or something? That's weird. That's just very strange to me. But CCP changes requirements on hulls and things like that a lot. That's not an unusual thing, but it usually doesn't go up. It's usually going down. Oh, Mina, you know what it might be? They there's a couple of different kinds of fighters. You may not have like the support skills for it. There's the space superiority fighters. Maybe look at that. Maybe it's the subtype, because there's light fighters and space superiority fighters. Check that. It may be one of those where you can train that to like level 1, um, because they may have split that skill. I'm trying to remember. That's been years ago. Yeah, when you get blown up in a T3C now, back at this point in time, you would lose 1 skill level in one of the 5 subsystem skills, like offense, defense, propulsion, things like that. That's not the case now. That was one of those where uh, it was a meme and something that actually did happen a lot, and it used to piss people off all the time. Is you would hear in an FC or somebody just say, damn it, I just lost, this level 5 skill, and I'd have to retrain it. That used to happen a lot, and it was so
That would
annoying.
blow.
Sorry, Mel, if I missed that. What was that?
That would totally blow.
Oh yeah, it was horrible.
And don't forget clone skill insurance.
Yeah, so clone grades was a thing back when Mina was playing as well. Fuck that noise. I mean, that when that
Yeah.
went away, yeah, no, that was horrible.
Um. So I have a question, just more of an abstraction. What's usually used as the typical measure of the strength of a group?
Usually it's by their player count. How many players in fleets do they have? Like if it's not how many accounts you have or how many like alts that you've got. It's how many people you can put into a fleet. Um, so for a nullsec alliance, you should be able to fill, um, like an actual fleet, right? It holds 256 people or 256 alts, whatever you want to call them. If you're not able to fill at least 100 people in that fleet, calling yourself a major power is a stretch. Now, it may be that you're looking in the absolute worst time zone, for that group, and that's different. Um, like if you look at Goon Swarm uh, in US and EU Prime, if we are only filling 100 people in the fleet, that's because it's like a drunk roam and nobody cares. When we do main ops, we're filling 2 or 3 fleets, and that's what you would expect for a major power like that. Um, if it's like, hey, I'm gonna go do a roam, I've actually got a video that I did where I did a roam with Ventures into MJ TAC, which is Horde staging system. And I gave people these ventures, and we did it just as a lull laugh thing. And I think I had like 30 or 40 people on that fleet on something that was a complete ridiculous thing that I did one day because I felt like it.
Did you say ventures?
Yeah,
Mining
yeah,
ships?
yep, ventures. I put a
Wait, what?
yeah, ventures, the mining hull. I put a gun on them, and I gave everybody a hull, and we flew all the way up into MJ TAC and attacked their jump bridge.
The
What?
mining ventures are
Mhm.
evil little things if you get in their guns.
Yeah, they're very fast. They're very maneuverable. They have a really low sig radius, so they're hard to hit. Um, like if they take a hit, they're gonna die, but they're actually hard to hit. Um, and I did that one day, to be honest, guys, because I felt like it. I pinged out to everybody. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna do this. I did it on like a Saturday or Sunday, um, and we did. And I had like 30, 35, 40 people. I don't remember which. There's a video that I posted about it, but it's just like, yeah, we'll do this. Why not? I did one with a epithal as well. Put a drone on it and a gun, and we used epithals one day again because I felt like it. That was actually pretty hilarious. Horde got so mad they actually bombed the fuck out of us with stealth bombers against epithals. We're like freaking cowards. But it was a good bomb run. It was a well timed sequence. So my role as chief of staff is as the internal kind of a guy. So I look at the way our corporations are interacting with each other and with our directorate, with our SIGs and squads, the way the SIGs and squads are interacting with each other and with um, our corporations to make sure that the internal piece of GSF is more or less running smoothly, right? It's a whole bunch of nerds. You're never going to be in a, let's say, frictionless free environment. That's never going to be the case. But the idea is to minimize issues, and when an issue comes up, to resolve it as best you can. So my role is a lot of talking to people on Discord, uh, on our forums, answering questions. People would come to me and say, "Hey, I don't know who does this. I'm like, oh, well, that goes here to this person, or that goes to this group, or I can fix that for you. It's those kind of things. It's a lot of talking to people. It's a huge amount of just chit chatting with people. And sometimes people just want to talk too. It's like, I've got a problem, and here's my solution to it. It's like, okay, um, I know that's not going to work because I've tried that before, but I would rather have them talk me through their process. Maybe they have a different solution to it than what I think that they have, and that happens. Um, Sometimes you just got to let people fail. It's like, all right, man, I've told you the potential pitfalls. Uh, you do you. They may come back to you and say, yeah, you're right, that didn't work. Here's my new plan. And that's the best thing to see is someone who's got an idea, totally doesn't work. They come back to you with a new process. And that's a big part of how we find members of the directorate. It's not identifying a problem. Uh, I'm sure you guys have seen this in your own real life work, right? Anybody can spot that there's a problem and go, oh, well, this is just broken. And then they just sit there and wait for somebody else to fix it. Um, that's annoying, right? The best people that you want in a leadership team, all the nullsec alliances need people in a leadership team. And it's someone who can identify a problem, but then come up with a solution. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't work, do they come back to you with another possible solution? Again, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. That's how I identify people that I want to be in our leadership team, in our directorate, is they come up with a solution to a problem. And anybody can find problems. I mentioned this a while ago, that this is something I've picked up from my time in Eve that translates to the real world super well. You know, anybody can find a problem. Can you find a solution to that problem? And maybe you can't. Uh, this is something to where I have people come to me and they say, here's my problem. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. And that's fair. That's a fair point. That's part of what my job is to try and help with that. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. And I've got to pull in more brains. And it's like, okay, I'm going to bring this to the directorate and we're going to see if we can solve this. We're going to get 10, 20, 30 people to look at this issue and see if we can come up with a solution. Rarely does that fail. Um, I can't think of an account or a time when I've had to bring something to the directorate and said, "Hey, we got an issue. Uh, I need you guys' help solving this issue," and we have not been able to solve it. Because you get enough people to look at it, you get enough brain power to look at something, and you can find a solution. It may not be elegant, may not be pretty, but it usually works. It's probably a longer-winded explanation than you wanted, but that's what I do, man. I'm gonna take a drink while I see a couple of you all typing. So, no, that's a good question. Mostly, it's talking within Goonswarm Federation itself. Um, I rarely talk to people that are in other alliances within the Imperium. That's not really my job as chief of staff. We have a Corps Diplomatique. We call them CD. They're involved in anything that is outside Goonswarm. So they're involved in talking to other members of the Imperium, uh, to hostile or potentially hostile or neutral alliances. So anything that's outside of Goonswarm goes to our CD team. And I talk with the CD guys on a regular basis, pretty much every day. We're talking to them, but the internal piece to Goonswarm is primarily what I look at. So it's not just the corporations, but it's all of the aspects of Goonswarm's internal piece. So what we call SIGs and squads, right? The social groups that we have that transcend corporation lines, and then the corporations themselves. Yeah, within my own corporation. So I'm a member of Karma Fleet itself. Uh, within my corporation, within Karma Fleet, I have no standings and no roles at all. I have no ability to do anything in that corporation. I am just a line regular guy in Karma Fleet. My roles are exclusively at the alliance level. So if there's something that happens within Karma Fleet, um, I go to them and say, "Hey, here's the thing that happened," or they come to me and say, "Hey, here's the thing that happened," and we work with it together. But yeah, I have actually no roles at all in Karma Fleet, the corporation itself. It's technically my parent home corporation, um, but yeah, I don't do anything with them at all, like leadership wise. It's just not my role. Most people find that odd. But within Eve, you see that a lot, where somebody has roles within their alliance, but not within their parent corporation. That actually happens a lot.
I mean, that'd be just too much work, honestly.
It can be. Burnout is a big thing that you have to always be aware of and be worried about. It's my, as chief of staff, that's one of my biggest things to worry about is how do I manage burnout so that my people in the directorate are still in the directorate in 6 months. And it's looking at it and going, okay, we really love this person, we want them to do more, but they're already doing 5 things. If we add a sixth one on it, are we just going to burn them out and they're not doing anything? um, and that's a conversation I have with the other members of the leadership team quite a bit, saying, okay, we've got this person, we want them to do something, what's can they do it? Are we overloading them? A lot of times we go to that person, we say, hey, we've got an idea, we want you to do this, but I need you to tell me, is this going to be too much for you? Do you think you can handle this? And if they say yes, I can handle it, we usually give them that role, and then a couple of us watch them to make sure that they're not burning themselves out, which has happened, and we've had to come back to them and say, or they've come back to us and said, hey, I thought I could do this, I can't. We're like, all right, let's pull some responsibilities from you, bring them down a little bit so that you're not going insane. Uh, so when I'm not doing administrative, what do I do? Uh, to be honest, 99% of what I do is administrative. I am logged into the game client. I still do that, but the vast majority of what I do is administrative, just by its nature.
That's fair.
Yeah, when I'm not doing that, I am usually uh, helping coordinate fleets and activities and do all those kind of things from our command channels. A lot of people don't like they recognize my voice because I talk enough, um, but I've got enough alts in different places that it may be that you signed in for your capital fleet on my alt, but you just didn't know that because I'm talking to the command group, and the command group is talking to our pilots, so they don't ever hear me say that it's my alt that just lit this sino. So I do that as well, but it's just, yeah, most of what I do is administrative. A background kind of a thing. I've spent most of my EU career in the background, doing sinos for different things and, moving cap fleets around and supers and titans and doing all those kind of things. The vast majority of people don't don't even know that it's my alt doing it.
You should name them in a more obvious way.
Yeah, so some of our people are very unsubtle in how they name their alts. Um, it would be like Ranger 1, Ranger 2, Ranger 3, Ranger 4, Ranger 5. A few of our people name things like that. Um, that's never been me. I sat down one day when I was creating a new alt that I was going to use just to sign my own stuff around. It wasn't to be for moving Alliance fleets. That wasn't even a thing for me. I was just wanting to move my own carrier. And so I Googled real life scientists who were involved in wormholes because it kind of entertained me, the idea of an Einstein Rosen bridge. And so I found the names of real physicists and I combined two of them together to make a Sino alt. That's actually how I made one of my Sino alts.
Yeah, that's clever.
On the topic of character names, what's your favorite?
I think my favorite one is one I made during Vietnam. I was sitting on the command channels talking about making a new Sino alt, and I made one that said, "Did you read the ping?" And that's actually one of my Sino alts. And I think that one entertains, and it's really fun. I made three of them kind of that. So I have one that says, "Did you read the ping?" I have another one that says, "What's the Sino called?" And when I link those in Fleet, some of the FCs are so mad at me. They're like, "Seriously?" Like, yeah. And because of course they've got to say that name and they've got to put it in the MOTDs. There's a couple of them that really hate that, so I use those signals whenever I can, just to needle them.
Yeah, there's some pretty fun ones out there.
Breakthrough Paul is one of my favorites.
Bling, I'm sorry, I missed that. What was that?
Instead of Brisk Ball, it's Bricks Paul.
Oh yeah, he's got. Um, there have been some really fun, pieces with him. He was great for Doomsday when you could actually target him when you could target subcaps with Keepstar Doomsdays. Um, we used to Doomsday Brisk just because we could, and it was entertaining to us. And the enemy used to do it to him all the time because he was on the CSM and everything like that. We used to have so much fun.
Oh yeah, he's a celebrity.
Yeah, it became a meme and just a happy thing of like, you wake up with your cup of coffee and it's like, have you doomsdayed Brisk today? It was just a fun thing we used to do.
So, this is a question because I don't really do anything beyond tiny things because I'm still awful at this game. How does higher end from a how do higher end ships from an organizational level work? Not from a play, but from from the organizational point of view.
Not what you mean by that. Like for a carrier or a super or what do you mean? Like how they're used?
Like how are they used? Do any of them that people like, but the organizations don't, or something like
Um, so the biggest change that has happened is how they're produced now, which they've got all of these components to them now. Again, they used to be just straight minerals, just minerals. You put them in there, you got a carrier, um, and supers and titans and dreads and all that kind of stuff. You just put them in there, you get those out. When they did the change to the battleships that I mentioned earlier, the carriers and dreads and supers, they all got that same kind of a change, right? They've got an extra component to them. So it really increased the cost to produce them. Um, that has negatively impacted their feasibility to be used. So you don't see people using Titans and Supers like you did 5 years ago because they're so expensive to produce now that if you lose one, they're really a heavy strategic asset. Um, so it used to be that you could build Titans and you'd have them for, 40 billion ISK, let's just say. Um, the going rate for most Titans now is closer to 200. It's just they're so much more expensive now that if you're going to put a Titan on the field, you've got to be really sure of why it's there and what it's doing, because
How
they're
long has
so
it been?
expensive.
Sorry to interrupt. How long has it been since we actually had a Titan fight? Since the price went up?
So the last big Titan engagement was in M2. That was in the very end of 2020, beginning of 2021. I don't remember the exact day on it, but it was.
So Titans are expensive. Are they worth it at this point anymore for people to build and use?
So, and that's an excellent question. The answer for most people is no. People still do build them. They are still used, um, but they're used primarily now to bridge fleets around, right? To bridge subcap fleets. Um, the idea of a massive Titan brawl like an M2 that saw hundreds of them blown away, probably not. Somebody asked me earlier, is there going to be another war? And I said yes, because I firmly believe that. Will it be a Titan engagement war? Probably not. Not unless the CCP lowers the cost of those, because
So the
nobody will be
age of
willing to put them on the field.
the age of Titan engagements is gone then.
In my opinion, right now, it's less likely than it was, 5 years ago. Um,
Well, and the other part of it is how many dreads can you buy for that Titan?
Yeah, and dread prices have gone up as well. They're not too bad. It depends on the dread, but you're in the 4 or 5 billion range. Just varies, depending on what kind of dread you're looking at. Navy dreads and
That's just hull though, right? Not fully fitted.
well, I mean, yeah, but a fit on a dread is usually not terrible. It's maybe another billion or something like that. They're usually not awful.
That's not too bad.
Um, so for that 200, we're just going to round some numbers here to make things easier. Let's say a dread is 5 fully fitted and a Titan is 200 fully fitted, right? So you get 40 dreads for that Titan. Um, if you could find a lone Titan, right, without support, those 40 dreads would easily kill it. You'd lose at least one of those dreads, assuming it had a focus DD on it. That DD would kill that one dread. They'd probably gun down one or two more, but you never take all 40 of them out. So you definitely walk out of that engagement positive in that sense, right? That Titan is down. You've lost, let's say, 10 dreads. Well, you still got 30 dreads. Building 10 replacement dreads is infinitely easier than building one Titan.
So Titans are. Is even replacing Titan losses much of a good idea anymore? Or are
I mean, it's always
looking
good
like
to
they'll go the
replace
way of
them.
the dodo?
Yeah, it's always good to replace it if your guys lose something with an SRP, whenever you can. It helps morale. Again, morale is so critical to this. The thing is that so replacing one Titan, that's not that hard. Any alliance can replace one Titan. There were hundreds that were destroyed in M2. That's impossible. You cannot go back and replace like 200, 300 Titans in a day. That's not a thing. Most groups have a couple of Titans sitting around, go, oh, well, you know, Ranger lost his Titan. All right, here's a replacement. And then when Bling loses his Titan, it's like, all right, here's a replacement. And then Mina loses, and there's no more replacements, right? I mean, those Titan hangars are not nearly as big as they used to be. You can only replace a couple. I think they have to be built, right? And that building takes, depending on whether you've got the components already, takes about 30 days just to kind of prep something like that and get it going. If you've already got the components, it's faster. If you don't, it takes longer.
So making good on stuff from like M2 would take literal years to replace.
With the current mechanics, yeah, it'd be something like that. I mean, you'd have to
So
actually math it all out, but yeah, you're producing a couple of Titans a week, at the most.
And that is if you can even get the materials. The Jita supply on some of these materials is not that deep.
No, especially some of this low sec shit with them. Um, I haven't run the numbers, but like if you cleared out a couple of these pieces for Titans, you might be able to get like 10. And it would
10?
yeah, and then it would take time, and
That
then
few?
yeah, something like that. And then you'd get the next round of people to come in, put new stuff on the market, get some more, you do all
And
that kind of
mass
stuff. So
production wouldn't probably shave off a whole lot.
no, you can't mass produce them anymore.
So the large scale industrial age of Titans has gone away to artisanal because there's no ability to do it at scale.
Sure,
Up
you could put it
until
that way.
up until a month ago, 2 months ago, large scale production of any caps was pretty much artisanal.
I disagree a little bit with that, but your
What
point is solid.
changed
um,
recently
it's
about that?
Yeah, within about the last year, that has started to change to where, especially dreadnoughts can be produced a little bit more like that. But definitely supers and titans. Supers are getting better. Titans are still just a giant middle finger. But I think Fluffy, you're the one who said that. I think that maybe just it may be your and I's interpretation of at scale and things like that. There's always a relative kind of piece to that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's not like we're having 200 people line producing caps anymore.
That's definitely true. You're not making 500 of them in a month just because somebody's bored and got some extra titanium. Yeah, that's definitely not a thing. At the height of this dread production, and it was mostly dreads. People were making carriers too, but a dread cost less than 1 billion ISK to make.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you could get dreads for less than 1 billion ISK.
What the fuck?
Carriers
Yep.
too.
Dreads now cost. Well, dreads used to cost as much as like expensive battleships cost now.
Yep. Yeah,
That's crazy.
the
I can't think of that.
that Redeemer that I was telling you guys about at the beginning, right? That whole Elvalar thing, that's totally all his fault. That Redeemer cost me more to replace than the Dreadnought that it was stored in.
Sheesh.
Well, you asked me, how did the 2000 Raven fight work out? I mean, we did kill that Keep Star, if that's what you mean. It was because we were out of Caps and Titans? No, we had more. It's like I said, I wasn't involved in that. I was still in the hospital with that piece. But it was one of those things of, 2000 Ravens is cheaper than, all the caps and those Titans to do. But it still costs something like 1 trillion is to kill that Keep Star.
How much does a Keep Star cost?
Right now, it's about the same as a Titan. They're the 250 billion range, something like that.
So Titans suffer even more because the same amount of cost would go for a much more useful Keep Star?
So there's a thing with it, like a Keep Star is not a mobile platform in that sense, and the defensive capabilities of a Keep Star is really limited. Their offensive and defensive weaponry has been pretty heavily nerfed by CCP over the years. Their biggest thing is as a FOB, right, a forward operating base. So it's the sub caps and the regular caps that you stage out of a Keep Star that make Keep Stars dangerous. Keep Star Doomsday, yes, it can hit multiple targets, right? It'll bounce, sure, but you can fire it once every 10 minutes. They're not that hard to dodge and everything like that. They can't specifically target subcaps. They can bounce to them, but they can't target a
Is
subcap.
that with dilation or without?
The 10 minutes is without.
Okay, that must be painful without dilation. I mean, with dilation.
I mean, everything in tie-dye is painful. So, I mean, yes, but everything is. To be honest, 50% and less tie-dye is not that bad. You don't really notice it all that much. When you get to 10%, that's pretty excruciating.
Also, one more thing to say about the whole Titan thing. Like, they don't seem too useful at the moment. They don't see much use, but they're still incredibly valuable as a deterrent. Like, yeah, on paper, you're getting a better value out of something like 40 dreads, but if you're having a big fight, if you have the ability to escalate to Titans and the other side doesn't, then that's a massive advantage. So, like, yeah, they don't see
That's fair.
use, but like their primary use at the moment is as a deterrent. If one side has them and the other side doesn't, that's a huge advantage.
It's very similar to the mad doctrine that was used during the Cold War. They're basically fall into that kind of
No, but
category.
everyone knows everyone has Titans, but nobody wants to risk them.
To a certain extent, that's true. I mean, if you're going to put one on the field, nobody really cares, about like risking one Titan. Because, like I said, one Titan's not that hard to replace. If you're going to put 10 of them on the field, now people start to care, and they're going to be like, why? Why are you doing this? What's your escalation chain that was just mentioned? Why are you jumping to a Titan? It's like, oh, well, there's 200 enemy dreadnoughts on the field. It's like, 10 Titans is just going to be bait, right? That's just food. You're just chumming the water for 200 dreads. So that's something you got to keep in mind as to what is that scale. Because 200 dreads will absolutely kill 10 Titans. Those Titans are going to take some of the dreads with them, for sure. But those dreads are going to win. And that's at the point where you look at it and say, okay, can we trap those dreads? Because if I can put one Titan on a field and wipe away 200 enemy dreads, that's a trade I would take all day. Because 200 dreads takes longer to build than one Titan does.
Yep. Or if you have the option of swinging a 200 dread versus 200 dread fight in your favor by dropping 10, 50 Titans, that's also another thing.
Yep, yeah, you can absolutely do that, because then the enemy dread fleet has a choice, right? Do you try and kill the Titans, or do you, try and kill the enemy dreads? Yeah, that's absolutely a thing. I'm looking at your alt list there, and it's one of those when I first started playing, a lot of my alts did have like common name patterns, like there'd be pairs of them with it. But after a while, it was, I just stopped kind of caring. So a lot of my alts have a lot more random kind of name patterns to them, which I'll admit makes it a little harder for me, because I'm just like, oh shit, what alt did that? I have to admit, I'm just like, God, where's my KFU alt? I couldn't remember what account it was on. Because I don't have it's not named KFU alt. That would have been a really good thing to do, but that's not what I did. The new launcher does make that a whole lot easier, because you can, if you click on each of your alt's names, you can see what corporation they're in. So that makes it a whole lot easier.
I found something new today on the launcher too. You can do control find.
I did not know you could do that. I'll have to look at that. Yeah, my big thing to keep track of alts is I use JEve to keep track of their stuff. But honestly, I use Evemon a whole lot more to keep track of their skill training. And it will show you how much money they've got and stuff like that just on the main page. So I use JEve maybe every 2 or 3 days, right? I'll boot it up and update everything. But Evemon pretty much every day. I've got that open and looking at it. Unfortunately, there's another one that doesn't exist anymore. It got the dev on it. His wife or girlfriend, I don't know which, kind of made him stop doing it because it was taking all of his time. But there's one called Eve HQ. But that one was shut down years and years ago, which was a shame. It was basically Evemon and JEve Asset together. It was an awesome program.
Guilty. I
A
love
lot of
that.
work though.
Yeah, Eve HQ was great. It was a fun program. So Evemon is a skill training. It can do some other things, but I only ever use it for skill training. And then the other one is JEV Asset, and it's either asset or assets. I can't remember if it's plural or not. I think it's asset singular.
Assets.
Is it
It's
plural?
plural.
Okay, JEV Assets. Um, they
Yeah,
both
it's
been around.
JE assets. Yeah.
Yeah, they've both been around a really really long time. Only you can decide if you're comfortable with having a third party program on your computer. I mean, I don't consider them to be high risk, but it's something only you can make that call with.
Yeah, I mean, your antivirus always warns you.
Yeah, I mean, it should. If you've got an antivirus that's actually worth a damn, you should be fine, but uh, it's still up to you.
I know a lot of these have like unknown publisher, and that's what always pops up. Like when I put up a PIFA or Emon or anything like that, it's like unknown publisher. Are you sure you want to install this?
Yeah, PIFA is the other one that's used a great deal, and it is uh, ship design, allows you to fiddle with ship fits. PIFA is the other one that I use as well. I swear to God, though, every time I open that program, it's got an update. I'm like, Jesus, dude, seriously. I mean, it's
The fact that
nice.
it doesn't close all the way
Yeah, I mean, it's nice
until
that
you click
he
on it.
he does, and it does all these updates and everything. But I'm like, I swear to God, every time I open it.
And anytime CCP changes a number or like adds event drugs, right?
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's an interesting change on all these programs. We've been going like an hour and a half. I told Broden I would do like an hour, but we've just been chit chatting. So I think we'll do like a last call kind of a thing, and then I'll let you guys get back to your Sunday. So, any other questions or anything?
Well, I just want to say thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it and came out.
Totally appreciate it.
I will tell you, it's one of my uh, big regrets for the all the work that I do now. A couple of you asked me like, what is my roles and what do I do? Um, I was chair of classes for University when KFU was, excuse me, when KFU was first proposed and we first started doing it, and I had such high dreams of being on here with an instructor and doing things with it. And then I ended up with like 10 other space jobs, and I wasn't able to do it. During the beginning part of COVID, I was actually by far more active on KFU because, like so many of you guys were as well, we were all at home. I was working at home. Um, so I'd have
I
Eve on
wish.
the background doing mining with everybody in Saren on my KFU alts while I was working on a laptop sitting in front of my screen. But it never got to do this as much as I had originally wanted. So I mentioned that offhanded to um, Bruden the other day, and that's why he's like, "Oh, well, come and do a history class with us." So that's where this came from because I was talking to Bruden about this the other day. Final thing I will leave you. Actually, I like two more final things. If you guys have not seen the Clear Skies trilogy, these came out almost 10 years ago now. Literally three of them, all three of those. You can find them on like YouTube and everything. They're excellent. They're so much fun that you can uh, go and watch them, and you will probably see references in those movies that you have heard and even had no idea where they came from. They were fan produced. Uh, the guy who did them actually got permission from CCP to use some of their in-game trailer program systems. And so it's full support from CCP for it. They're a lot of fun. The first two are like 30 minutes. The third one's more like a full movie. It's like an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. But if you guys get a chance, if you have never seen them, you should. John Rourke is great in it. There's so much fun with those to go and see. My final thing for you, obviously,
Where are these again?
you can find them on YouTube. I think somebody just, yep, there they go. Somebody just linked it right there in the chat
Okay.
for you. That's the first one. There are 3 of them. So there's a Clear Skies 1, 2, and 3. Yep, there's 2. The final thing for it is obviously, I'm here for Goon Swarm. That is who I'm with. If you're thinking about getting into nullsec, of course we want you to join. Of course we want you to join Goon Swarm because that's who we're with. If joining a nullsec alliance is what you're interested in doing, right? I have to make that plug since I'm part of Goon Swarm. But anybody, getting out into nullsec, don't think of it as a scary place. Having done this for so long, HiSec is crazy scary to me now. We don't have our intel channels. There's no response fleets to try and save you. There's neutrals everywhere. HiSec is bloody scary.
Yeah,
Nullsec
null is safer
space.
than HiSec.
Yeah, nullsec space is actually pretty safe. And so if you're thinking about doing that, find one of the null groups to join. Just get out involved with it. Don't be afraid of the nullsec kind of experience. Yeah, every time I'm on one of my high sec alts doing something, I'm just like, there are so many neutrals here. I don't like this, and I just don't have my intel channels and everything like that. So I'm gonna link my YouTube channel that I did. Like I said, I will post this recording, and I have a couple of others that I've done for history just of Goon Swarm, for the Imperium and everything like that. I've done a few of these, so I will post that on here. Usually takes a couple hours to upload into the system, but thank you for coming out, and you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Outstanding. Appreciate it again.
Thanks, Ranger.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one, guys.
Yeah, have a good Sunday, everybody.